Machinima, we used to have to pay these creators, right? And one of the creators was too young. And this is like, we were a scrappy startup. I mean, there's like 20 of us working at this company at the time. But one of the creators was like, yeah, I'm too young. I can't get a bank account. So we started sending him his money through Bitcoin. And this is, I mean, dude, this is so...
You made this kid a millionaire.
Yes. So about 2 or 3 years ago, this kid comes up to me. I'm leaving a random baby shower in LA, a friend. I walk out. This guy's like, are you Wiz? I was like, yeah. I was like, what's up? He's like, he startled me. I was like, actually a little bit scared. He's like, you changed my life. I was like, what? Wow. I was like, what do you mean? I don't even know who you are. What I do to change your life? And he told me this story. He's like, you set the payments of Bitcoin, and obviously our accounting and all this stuff did. And because of that, I got in so early. And yeah, he lived down the street in a multi-million-dollar house. I was like, dude, I wish you would have told me to buy some Bitcoin at the time.
Yo, grab your headphones, get ready to roll. ZEROPOD coming at you, taking control. We talking about now, NFTs and Web3, doing it big, bringing the knowledge for free.
I got all swagged out as well. Of course, I got the Superchain swag from Farcon.
Merch, man.
I can hook you up. I think I have an extra one if you really want one. I got the red NAS glasses for Optimism. The only thing I don't have is the OP hat. Benji was supposed to send me one and he never did. So
some new ones cooking up, dude. We'll make sure we get you a Sunny OP hat.
All right, let's go. We're big fans of the Superchain on this podcast. We've had Benji on early. We had Jesse on recently. We've had James Ross from Mode. Who else? We've had Jacob. So I feel like we've got like the infinity stones of the Superchain. So we're just
I love it.
We're adding another one today.
Let's do it.
Welcome to ZEROPOD, a CC0 video podcast about enjoying Ethereum. We have a super guest for you this week, and that is none other than Mr. Ryan Wyatt, the Chief Growth Officer at Optimism. I'm excited to chat with him about his career, his first year at Optimism, and what's next for the Superchain. Welcome to ZEROPOD, Ryan.
Thanks for having me on, man.
We like to take a personal bent with this podcast and sort of get into the people before the places and things. So can you tell us a little bit about your childhood? And I'm assuming it included a lot of gaming.
It did against my mom's best wishes. Yeah, I started gaming early. Nintendo, like playing on the Nintendo when I was 3 years old. My brother, who's older than me, asked for it for Christmas, got it. And I was the beneficiary of that request, getting to be able to play. And lifelong gamer. Like I played competitively. I commentated esports tournaments. I worked for, one of my first jobs, actually while I was still in college, was a company called Major League Gaming, working in the esports industry. And I mean, doing everything from, reffing tournaments and commentating them, helping with sales and sponsorships. I mean, the whole thing. And so, yeah, I got really hooked on two specific games. I mean, I played a lot of different ones through my life, but Counter-Strike was the biggest one. And that's really what got me into PC gaming when I was about 13, 14 years old, 8th grade freshman year. And then as I went to college, I got more into console gaming. I brought the Xbox 360 and so forth and started playing Call of Duty 4. And Call of Duty is really where I my love for gaming was reinvigorated and still a gamer today, still have two kids and have a pretty busy job, but definitely still try to get in some games of Valorant every once in a while where I can squeeze them in.
I love it. It sounds like you were able to parlay your passion for gaming into some jobs, like even early days in your college career and whatnot. So how did you manage that? Because that wasn't even probably when you were younger, being a professional gamer wasn't even something people thought was an option.
Yeah, it's a good question. Really in college, I started having a little bit of self-reflection. So I went to Ohio State and I realized I was just really, really, I underperformed in anything that I wasn't interested in. Like academically, athletically, everything in between, and so while I was in college, I was like, I have to work in the gaming industry. I'm not a game designer. I'm not a game developer. What does that kind of mean for me? And so part of my exploration was like, hey, there's so many different things that you can do in the gaming industry other than making games. Games need supported from a, marketing perspective, a BD and partnerships perspective, like, how you look at the economics of video games. And you can get involved in the gaming industry in a lot of different ways. And ultimately, I ended up doing it through video content, right? Working at YouTube. And so that was like a big wake up call for me of like, you gotta if you are going to do high level work, you're going to have to do it in something that you're really passionate about. And so for me, it became non-negotiable that I working in the gaming industry. Like that was what I was going to do, and I was going to do that with certainty because that was going to give me the best ability to do my best work.
I feel like that's a lesson in their moment because, you know, sometimes people think they can't make a career of their hobbies or what have you. But, you know, like you just said, there's so many different facets of every hobby and ways that you could turn them into a career potentially.
Absolutely. You know, and it was one thing, you know, for my whole life, I was always into video games and always loved them, and definitely loved them more than, you know, the average person. And so it was just it was a wake up call for me in college that was what I needed to do next. It was helpful because I was like, okay, what's interesting to me? And, you know, YouTube and Justin TV, still early days, like people weren't really watching people play video games online or anything, you know, and YouTube was still kind of like,
which is crazy to think of now, right? Where it's become such a mainstay.
Oh, it's wild. I mean, even in a million years, I wouldn't have guessed it got that big, like ever have gotten as big as it did. And, you know, I left Major League Gaming and went to a company called Machinima, which was basically doing gaming kind of like video content, you know, editorial, MTV style, you know, game breakdown, G4, you know, I'm probably dating myself a little bit here, but a lot of the way gaming content was consumed was like still in the traditional media model. And so this was this idea, you know, how do we bring this into the digital age, right? And this is like, you know, 15 years ago or whatever it is. And so that was like, you know, I moved out to LA. I was in Ohio, and I moved out to Burbank, California.
Bit of a change of scenery.
My man, like wild. Realized that, you know, a dollar doesn't go as far in California as it does in Ohio, which was a big change for me. But yeah, I went out and you know, dropped out of college my last quarter because I finally had got this job. And so it was like, this is the opportunity you're waiting for. This was around kind of the financial crisis in 08, 09, lingering into 2010. And so for me, when I got the opportunity, it was like, worst case scenario, it doesn't work out. I can go get my degree, come back, but I can't pass this up. Glad I didn't, you know, like that ultimately working there, Google Ventures invested in Machinima, and I was an early employee there. And that created the visibility I needed to get a job at Google, at YouTube.
Amazing. So tell us about that. When did you go to work at YouTube, Google, and what was that job like?
That was 2014. Yeah, so like 10 years ago. I started working there, and just the most amazing experience ever. You know, I did like 15 interviews throughout the process. It was insane. They had never had somebody as a head of gaming before at YouTube. They really wanted to start building up this vertical. You know, how do we work with creators? How do we work with gaming publishers? How do we monetize it? You know, how do we think about the live streaming business? What products do we need to create? You know, how do we actually, you know, bring kind of products that are driven out of the gaming creator community to the broader YouTube creator ecosystem? And so it was just a blast. I mean, the visibility I got, I was only 27 years old when I got the job to be the head of gaming at YouTube. So I was definitely in over my head. You know, they certainly took a chance on me.
Was it like an aqua hire situation, or you left?
No, they opened up a role, and you know, they knew Machinima based it from the Google Ventures investment. But yeah, no, it was just it was a role that they hired for that I interviewed through, and so awesome. I mean, it was there 8 years, got to see so much. One of the best professional experiences. And at the end of that is when I started to look at crypto. Like I wasn't into crypto at all. You know, my friends are in tech. And so I obviously was, you know, pretty well versed on the ecosystem, you know, just from an outside perspective, you know, and like really what happened is I started looking at like, what could YouTube do on chain? And part of that pulled me into this like exploration of truly putting like, you know, because I'm a Counter-Strike fan, of if you actually had these digital items on chain, what could you do, and so forth. And kind of went down.
Which is interesting because that's always a discussion point when people talk about gamers and their, you know, historic hate for crypto, and it's just like it doesn't make sense because they're so willing to spend all this money on skins and all these things that they don't really own. And so like for crypto people, it's always like they're banging their heads being like, why don't gamers get it?
Yeah, the delivery of the message has been unrefined and without great product. And so I think gamers initially are going to meet it with skepticism, but I think long term, as this stuff materializes, it'll be less of an issue. I think like you have to have some kind of perspective in your own mind of how long these things take before they get some kind of consumer adoption. And for me, I'm like, gaming is a long road with gamers. Inevitably it'll crack, but you know, we're not at that place yet.
Also, I think it comes down to abstraction too. Like I think a lot of the times, you know, people will accept these improvements, these quality of life improvements, but only once they're completely abstracted. Once a game comes out, and you know maybe those skins are completely all owned, but they don't have to see it as crypto. They don't have to see it as blockchain tech. They just know that they own their skins now. All of a sudden, you know what I mean?
Agree. The infrastructure layer is too exposed to the user, which like illustrates the issues that it has with it. And that there's lessons in there.
Yeah, for sure. Amazing. Well, I mean, can you tell me sort of maybe one of your favorite memories of working at Google? I want to be careful not to gloss over it because it was, you know, 8 years of your life, and obviously you learned a lot there. So I'd love to hear if you have one or two favorite memories from that time.
Oh man, I have a lot of them. Really, truly, my favorite memory is the first day I started working at Google, like going to Google at Mountain View and being on campus and going to orientation and just being like, wow, this is what a great experience and opportunity I have in front of me to learn. And yeah, I will like always remember that. And a lot of really good learning experiences being around people like Susan Wojcicki in the room all the time, and Neil Mohan, who's the current CEO, and my boss, who's now the CEO of Warner Music. Like a lot of really good memories of being around these people at a young age to learn from, and you know what kind of leadership attributes they have and how they do it. So yeah, I mean so many, but day one truly is probably the most memorable moment for me.
Yeah, and I mean, Google has a reputation, and especially at that time, had a reputation as being one of the best places in the world to work too. So, I'm guessing the quality of life was pretty good.
It was great. Yeah, I mean, it's like you want to work hard because you love what you do. You love the company you work at. They create an environment for you to be pretty cozy at the office and want to work hard as well. And like the people around you, you know, iron sharpens iron. So it's just so many good things about it. You know, at the end there, for me, a lot of it was repetitive. You know, the best way I could describe it is imagine if you, you know, just had like your senior year of high school and you were, you had a great year, you know, you're an A student, and your next year was actually starting all over again, your senior year. You're like, well, I already had these experiences. I've already done these classes. I've already done this. This feels like, you know, is this how I should be spending my time? And so for me at the end, it was like, okay, this is, same thing, you know, different day. And I felt like it was diminishing returns on now advancing because I had learned so much and I've been there so long, which made me really excited to jump into crypto because I'm like, this frontier's got 1,000 problems that need tackled, high promise, high potential. And so it was real easy for just like to come in and jump in.
Career aside, I mean, we're going to talk about Polygon in just a minute, but in terms of your own personal crypto journey, like had you owned crypto before this? You said you just sort of
tried... I like YOLO'd into ETH at different points on Coinbase, but you know, I had never read the Bitcoin white paper and became, you know, like truly red pilled. So it was, you know, it was nothing crazy. And the funny thing too is so at Machinima, we used to have to pay these creators, right? And one of the creators was too young. And this is like, we were a scrappy startup. I mean, there's like 20 of us working at this company at the time. But one of the creators was like, yeah, I'm too young. I can't get a bank account. So we started sending him his money through Bitcoin. And this is, I mean, dude, this is so...
You made this kid a millionaire.
Yes. So about 2 or 3 years ago, this kid comes up to me. I'm leaving a random baby shower in LA, a friend. I walk out. This guy's like, are you Wiz? I was like, yeah. I was like, what's up? He's like, he startled me. I was like, actually a little bit scared. He's like, you changed my life. I was like, what? Wow. I was like, what do you mean? I don't even know who you are. What I do to change your life? And he told me this story. He's like, you set the payments of Bitcoin, and obviously our accounting and all this stuff did. And because of that, you know, I got in so early. And yeah, he you know, lived down the street in a multi-million-dollar house. I was like, dude, I wish you would have told me to buy some Bitcoin at the time. So
it's amazing.
Yeah, very funny story. I never really had any exposure to it up until then, until joining.
Amazing. Awesome. So how did the opportunity with Polygon come to be?
Yeah, so originally I was like, I need some more spice, some more flavor in my life, and I got really interested in this industry. I was gonna do an advisory with Polygon, so spent time chatting with Sandeep. Love Sandeep, just like absolute hustler, community oriented dude, just gets it. Couple good combos with him, and was like, all right, I'll do an advisory. Well, long story short, it ended up, there was mutual desire of like, let's just do this thing, like worst thing that could happen is I go back to the Web 2 industry if it's not for me or whatever. And this is the same energy it took to dropping out, school. It had worked. I was like, there's something here. I'm going to try it out. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So I just fully committed. At that time, what we were spinning up was a small little team called Polygon Studios. So actually, it was like a subsidiary of Polygon, and it was going to be focused on kind of gaming and NFTs and all of this stuff. But about like 6 or 7 months into that role is when, the founders decided to put everything together and have like one large entity, which was Polygon Labs. And then was the president of that, was there for 2 years. Polygon went through big change. When I was there, it was, how do we grow a single chain, single ecosystem? How do we look at, creators and DeFi and just app developers more broadly to deploy on Polygon POS chain? Now like what they do is, as they think about how to aggregate all of these different ecosystems and how to use ZK proofs to build interoperability with AgLayer, different direction. But I loved what I was getting to do at Polygon. It was like very, very fun. It was sad because FTX happened, right? Like the industry was really fun. There was a lot of momentum, and then just like that,
Well, it's hard. I feel like in crypto, it's hard to go first too. Everyone always talks about first mover advantage, but like first movers also have to like go through that field with all the mines in it and hope that they don't hit any, right? And I feel like Polygon like really did that. They were out there as one of the first L2s to really be pioneering. People didn't even believe in the roll-up centric roadmap really at that point. So it's kind of crazy what they were able to accomplish given all that.
Oh, it was so much fun. It was great. It was a good ride. And then came to Optimism, right? I think it was like, with Polygon was there 2 years. I think like different direction was needed a change for me as well too. So, was kind of like, do I just stay advising? Do I go into VC? Like, I definitely want to do VC one day. I love working with founders. I love being on the forefront of tech, and had some great conversations with Jing, and was like, let's do this thing at Optimism. And it was fun because it was different than Polygon, right? Like people were like, wait, how's it really different? The big thing is it's that getting one ecosystem, like there's a different role when you're focused on growing a single ecosystem, like a Polygon POS chain or a Base or even Arbitrum, versus this role, which is, how do you really get OP Stack to be this like shared standard that all L2s are using? I mean, that is an entirely different mandate, different opportunity, very unique to just Optimism, truly. And so
it's like being the CEO of Linux in a way. It's like you're the CEO of this like open source amorphous
funny, right?
thing.
Yeah. And so I've loved it. I've been here a year now. Been in crypto 3 years now. So, long story short, so happy I made the jump and love Optimism. I mean, we had a really fun year.
Yeah, for sure. And it has been exactly almost 1 year, like a few weeks ago, right? We celebrated 1 year.
November 1st.
Amazing. Congrats on that.
Thank you.
Before we talk about your year at Optimism, can you tell us what is a chief growth officer? Maybe people are asking, like, it's not a normal C-suite role. So what is it? How does it compare? Is it like a CEO? Is it different?
I have the BD partnerships, marketing, comms function. So these are the core functions I think required to go out and evangelize a product, overall talk and communicate what the product is, get people using the product, and get people happy that they're using the product, right? It's kind of what these functions basically look like. And so that's what it boils down in a nutshell. I mean, I think in our ecosystem, COO is probably the more like old school Web 2 term for that function and responsibility. But with the way we think about Optimism is truly a collective, and there are a lot of contributors, and there is a real governance system. It's a very different role in that regard because you are working with grants council, and they're going to make their own decisions on what to invest in, and they have that right. And then you've got retro funding where people are, voting on what projects should be funded. And so the way that you have to navigate this stuff is like very different from Web 2. You've got to figure out how you bring a lot of people along, how you get aligned across the board. You can't unilaterally just make decisions. You need to be able to do this as a group, and as a group that's going to have different perspectives, different opinions, and navigating that. And so the role has, a politicking kind of element that needs to be played because you've got to work with a lot of different folks, and you don't get to just be the person that can pull all these strings, right? And that's the beauty of it. That's like what we're building towards. It's the outcome everybody wants, and we want more of that, actually. And it's like more transparency, more, committee consensus and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned retroactive funding, and I wanted to ask you about that because I think retro PGF is one thing that Optimism does that is very unique. And maybe coming from outside, it wasn't even something you were familiar with before. So what was it like coming in and sort of learning about this idea of just having this semi-decentralized way to reward people for building on the ecosystem?
Yeah, we've made a lot of progress with retro funding. We have a lot of work still to do. The concept, if you don't know on what retro funding is basically all of the OP stack chains in the superchain contribute 15% of their sequencer revenue to the Optimism Collective. That allows kind of constant funding to go back into an ecosystem that goes back into developers, and it goes back to developers in this mechanism of what we call retro funding. The concept of retro funding is, hey, if we give you a framework of things that add value to the ecosystem, and we give you that visibility, if you're building projects or doing work that contributes to that framework, you have a path to know that you'll be rewarded. Now, the critic says nobody wants to do work and then maybe get paid after, which I think is a very fair commentary. And so what we're starting to see and trying to move forward to is if you can show very clearly what success looks like, you have programs that are frequently running, you can increase your reliance on if I do X, I get Y, versus it feeling abstract or feeling like you don't know exactly how to contribute. But long story short, what this does is it really creates this kind of exponential effect of developers that are building and contributing to the Optimism ecosystem. And they're doing it in so many different ways. They're doing it with improving gov tooling. They're doing it with making improvements to the actual OP stack. These are contributions that are very helpful. You get a new block explorer that comes up that's really cheap, in a world where Etherscan is expensive, and you have that opportunity that any of the OP stack chains can use that block explorer. And so it does
creating amazing educational content.
Yes, and amazing educational content, right? So there's look, every time we've run one, we get good feedback, and there's a lot more work to do. But I do think they're getting better, and the feedback is always appreciated. And it's a great concept. I wasn't familiar with it before.
Yeah, most people aren't. I wasn't either until I learned about it. When we had Benji on the podcast, one thing that he said kind of still rings true to me, and he talked about how retro PGF kind of creates this. How did he put it? He said it basically ends this financial martyrdom problem where the smartest people come out of the best schools, and why would they ever want to work on fixing the roads? Why would they ever want to work on the things that actually need to be fixed because they have to be financial martyrs to do so? And that how retro PGF has this a utopian vision of maybe, creating a world where those people can work on the hard problems of Ethereum and the hard problems of fixing society and know that they will be rewarded for their contributions.
Yep, absolutely. And, so there's 800 million OP tokens in that. And then, there's other ways that people can get chains or people can get grants, like chain operators as well, and the Gov Fund, who put proposals, forward where, Base asks for OP tokens to go spur application developer activity on the Base ecosystem, right? And so we truly are all building and working together, which has been fun, that's again, when you talk about life's pretty short, man. Never in my career moving forward will I ever get the opportunity to kind of do something like this again. It won't happen ever again, right? Like this is it's a moment in time. It's a very unique opportunity. And so, yeah, I love it.
Well, that's part of the reason why I invited you to come on the pod, is because I saw your post about it being 1 full year at Optimism. And, I saw in your bio that you were the chief growth officer. I was thinking, damn, like there has been a lot of growth at Superchain. So that looks pretty good on your resume. And I wanted to talk to you just about that, because over the past year, we've been following the Superchain pretty closely, but there's been so many ecosystems that have decided to use the OP stack to spin out their own L2s. Famously, we've had Base. Coinbase decided to do Base, instead of, for example, doing their own L1 like what Binance did in the past. They decided to go this route. We've had Mode launched. We had Zora decide to go with an L2 on the OP stack. We had who else? Sony with Sonium, WorldCoin. So all of these different orgs have decided to partner with the OP stack. Why do you think that is? Why do you think OP is winning the culture war, as it were, in some ways in the L2 space?
Yeah, there's a handful of things. I think one, there's certainly this idea that it is better for us to build together. And when I say us, like all the people that are inside the Superchain and OP stack, like building on OP stack, because all those teams are contributing to moving the OP stack forward, and those contributions then get rolled out to the whole ecosystem. So there's like exponential developer effect that happens there. Uniswap is launching Unichain, and they're going to have start 1 second block time confirmations, and they're working with Flashbots to do that. And then that's something that can roll out to all the OP stack chains, right? Until that work then becomes net positive for the entire super chain, including, a base and a future state. It's pretty sick. Yes, we've also done grants for these folks, right? Like they have to be in the super chain. They're going to have to participate from a governance perspective, right? Like they need to have voices inside the super chain. They will be participants in deciding what does governance look like? How is the superchain governed? Who are the role players? Like they play a role like delegates do, and many others inside the superchain ecosystem that have like true responsibility to the ecosystem that is tangible and real. OP stack is just very easy. Like if you look at the two chains that you can just like spin up right away, or solutions, it's Arbitrum and Optimism, right? Like it's an Orbit chain L3 on top of Arbitrum, or it's an OP stack L2. That's kind of where these things have gone at this point. And so instead of swimming upstream and having to do all the DevOps that comes with keeping your chain secure, setting up a security counselor so you can get to stage 1, there's just a lot, launching a token. I mean, like all these different things that like folks have to go through if they're going to create a chain and go alone, where they don't have to do that stuff. So basically when you look at like Optimism, there's two kind of paths you can take. There is OP stack is MIT open license. You can just like take it, fork it, use it for free. And that's like what Blast did. Then you've got people that are working, on the Optimism governed block space, OP stack. And by doing that, all of these chains are on the same software. They're on the same version. They're on the same standard. They have done key handover to Optimism Security Council. They're part of OP government block space. All of these attributes, like being in there, they're contributing revenue to the collective, like we talked about, is going to allow that group to solve some of our bigger issues around interoperability and fragmentation. So like when I say all of that is like that whole line of thinking is a big part of why people will choose it, right? What is somebody coming in when they're assessing OP stack? They're like, okay, what's the product offering? What changes can I make to the OP stack chain that are going to be helpful to me? How do I get a lot of users? How do I get liquidity? How do I get all the partner integrations that you need, from RPCs to oracles, block explorers, wallets? When all of those chains are on the same standard and configuration and version, the work that any of those folks have to do is not incremental anymore, because they the chains look the same to a lot of those folks. So I think now my take would be, if you're going to roll an L2, you do it like with OP stack in the super chain as a stage 1 chain right out of the box. It's just like, it's a immediate path to being stage 1. its immediate path to figuring out how to solve interoperability long term. And so it just has some of these properties. I think this is the momentum that you're actually seeing, and you're seeing a real solution to scaling Ethereum.
How much has Base's success contributed to the Superchain success, do you think? Do you think that, seeing what Jesse, the Base team have done has affected, WorldCoin's decision and Hayden's decision and all these people's decision? Not to take away from the work that you guys have done.
No, absolutely.
But
Jesse's been nothing short of a saint for Optimism and the Superchain and Base and all the work that it's done. So no, like I think so much of the momentum can be attributed to Base taking a big leap of faith and bet on Optimism and the OP stack early on. And navigating the downside was could you navigate competitors wanting to work in the same ecosystem, right? And so like the take that you would take on like, ooh, Base could be a problem was it's going to create the Krakens and the Uniswaps of the world aren't going to want to work together and not be in the same ecosystem. And so more than anything, it was I'm glad that the Optimism ecosystem got to benefit from both worlds. It benefited from this halo effect of momentum that Base drove for Superchain awareness, OP stack awareness. But it also didn't alienate competitors, that the competitors saw a bigger opportunity that, look, we might compete with you inside of the Superchain. It is better for us to all be inside of the Superchain while doing that. Speaks volumes, and that's the coolest shit that happened this year from my perspective.
There's a story I read one time. I'm Canadian, and there's these two electronics brands that used to exist up here, Future Shop and Best Buy. You guys have Best Buy, I think. Anyways, they used to always build side by side, Future Shop and Best Buy, and people thought they were different companies, but they were owned by the same company. And it was this strategy that they had figured out that if they had these two companies side by side, one was like a commission model and one was like a browse by yourself model, and they would just make more revenue by building those two things side by side, even though they were in direct competition. I think about that all the time.
I absolutely know. I love that. I think all ships rise works here, and I think that's what we're going to see play out. And we'll be look, Uni and Kraken's chains are around the corner, to be honest with you, and so I'm excited to see how all that goes.
I never even thought about it from that perspective, with like Kraken having to think like, do we really want to be, in bed with Coinbase, right? But like you said, the obviously the benefits outweighed the challenges for them.
It's that, and if you have confidence in what you're doing, these things don't matter then.
Yeah, for sure.
I think those teams are very confident in what they want to deliver, how they want to deliver it, and like to who they want to deliver it to.
Well, speaking of challenges, I'd love to hear from you. What have been the biggest challenges that you've faced in your first year at Optimism?
Yeah, it was a lot. We didn't have a team, so we had to grow the team. We only had like a couple folks, so not a challenge, but like that was the thing we needed to get done, and it was like first order of business. One thing too is we really had to streamline what the offering was, right? So people are like, I don't know, like, what is OP Stack? How do you get into it? What does it look like? Can you make changes? And so I kind of already laid out that, where it's like you have this one Optimism governed block space version, and then everything else, which is like a forked chain. That got much easier and simple. The other challenge was, a lot of people just associate Optimism with the L2, right? So we really had to change the way people think about Optimism, that we are this OP Stack, offering, that we are bigger than one chain, that we are a group of them, that it's the super chain, yada, yada. So that was a challenge.
In a way, there's like almost like a seppuku too. It's almost like Optimism had to like sacrifice its identity as an L2 in some ways in order to.
Yeah, we did some pretty, loud marketing. If you remember, we did, Optimism is not an L2, and that kind of was like, like everyone freaked out a little bit, but it was good, right? Like we did that shock marketing because it was a way to reset the way people think about Optimism, and I think it's worked out. But that was the biggest challenge. Moving into next year, our biggest challenge is like get these chains up and running, get these chains to stage one, make sure these chains are successful, right? And they have the ecosystem support they need to succeed. So yeah, I feel like year one, we were able to knock a lot of the challenges out. Some of them were self-inflicted. Some are just part of growing pains.
Continuing on the theme of challenges, one thing that constantly gets brought up by people who are maybe not as bullish on Ethereum as you or I, they'll often harp on about liquidity fragmentation and about how, that's the biggest thorn in ETH's side, is that, how can you possibly, get people, to move their projects to your chain if people have to bridge 6 different times to get there, etc. Now, I know from following the Superchain from early days that has been a priority to sort of fix that interop. Can you talk a little bit about that and about what's coming down the pike for interoperability between superchain chains?
Yeah, I think that this argument is all of it's a time frame argument. If you look right now, the user experience, and let's just say this user is like a DeFi user, right, is better on Solana, right? Like it is a better experience. You just like get your your tokens in a Solana, in a Phantom, or like on Solana, and just everything works, right? And it's a great experience. And I think what we're talking about is, when we think about Ethereum, we will solve this. This is going to get solved. And with this framework, we're going to be able to do like orders of magnitude of scale in supporting a huge ecosystem. And the question is, well, that doesn't exist today. So what Solana has is sufficient. But in a world in the future, like, how do we support 100 million, 500 million users on chain? If you really want to be this, like, reinvent the internet. And so I totally believe that we're going to need to have like a wide range of L2s. And that's kind of a meme. It's like, oh, another L2. And it's a meme because right now, if you think about the 3 issues that we face today, you've got fragmented liquidity. Like your assets are all over the place. It's a mess, you could have USDC across like 12 different chains. It's like a horrible experience.
Yeah, and it shows up as 12 different assets in your wallet too.
Yeah, dude, it's terrible. Moving assets between chains has vulnerability risks. Like bridging, third-party bridging, all of this. What you just explained, like the cross-chain UX challenges. You go into your wallet, you're like, wait, I thought I had 100 USDC, but I got to go to like across and bridge it 26 different ways to get it in one wallet. It's just a nightmare. That's why we really are like, we're leaned heavily into, we need to be on this like shared standard of the OP stack. If you're on that shared standard of the OP stack, we can actually start to solve this stuff, because we can create an ecosystem of those chains being interoperable, because you have basically shared security, because they're all on the same standard and version. One bug in any of them is a bug in all of them. And so like you can identify, you can like be on top of that. There is no different bugs that could exist on Uni that wouldn't exist on Base. And so there's real ability to kind of like scale security from that perspective, because the chains are all in the same standard and version. Rolling out upgrades, you can do it across the entire ecosystem. So the actual product itself is always getting better. You have this path with Security Council to B stage 1 with, a Security Council established. So now you're like setting up, all of the different cards for interoperability to be solved. You haven't actually solved interoperability, but you've set up the framework in which to solve for it. But what we're starting to move forward is each one of these interoperable chains, they'll run verifying node for each of the chains in the interoperable set. And like, we will actually, because they are on the same version and same trust properties and same security properties, you'll actually be able to get these like instant interoperable ecosystem amongst these chains. So
does that mean that like the base node will just automatically know how much ETH I have on the Zora L2? And just
so when you want to like move your base ETH, to OP mainnet ETH, it actually just knows it right away, so it can burn mint immediately. And that experience to you is just like, oh, boom, it's just there. So like, it's not like, oh, my ETH's on Base, oh, it's on OP mainnet. Or Zora, you see an NFT you want on Zora, and you've got ETH across, Base and OP mainnet. Just buy it. Like, that shouldn't be something. Work with the wallet providers to make sure it's integrated. You shouldn't have to worry about that stuff. You should abstract it away. Is it still happening behind the scenes? Yes, it's still happening mechanically, but it's been abstracted away, which will be really, really big. The other thing too is I think we'll create a whole different framework of how app devs think about deploying applications across the superchain. So needless to say, a lot of work cut out for us. This is no small feat. It will only be this cluster, right? But if that cluster, if more people are continuing to say the LP stack chain is the L2 that I want to, use, and that becomes a shared standard, then that cluster can be all those L2 chains, right? you can just like, that's why like when I think about what does success look like, it's TVL market share, L2 TVL market share, it's L2 transaction TVLs of the super chain, because that is a group that can, all those assets can be interoperable in theory, right?
Right.
We have a lot of work. We'll get, first half of this year, hopefully we'll get, 2 chains interoperating and 3 or 4 by the second half of next year.
Nice. Do we know which chains are going to be? Could we guess?
Oh, TBD. A lot of folks are excited. Like everybody, everybody's on board, right? Like if you think about the people that are making decisions right now, Kraken joining and Uni joining and all these folks, they're salivating for interop. I can't get.
Well, Uniswap especially, right? I mean, Uniswap probably needs it more than most.
Just imagine, right? So I'm stoked for next year. We have big stuff we got to work on. The dreams are big, but manageable. We have such good talent across this. Like, think about it. You get Coinbase engineers and Kraken engineers and OP Lab engineers and Uniswap engineers. Like all these people are working on this problem together in some way, shape, or form and playing a role in it. And I'm bullish as hell on all those protocol engineers that are contributing.
So once these hard problems do get solved and interop is sort of smooth and people can bridge from Coinbase or from Binance or from Kraken over to, let's say Zora chain and then use that ETH anywhere across the super chain. Like that's how smooth it is. Why is it better at that point than Solana, which we talked about earlier, or Avalanche or any of these other L1s that are optimized because they're centralized in a lot of ways?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of things. I think like you'll have a similar user experience that spans a wider net, right? Like is how I think about it. If you're no longer choosing between Arbitrum, Solana, Base, and you're like the super chain, you're like you have that same user experience now, but inside of a huge ecosystem, a lot of different folks doing a lot of different stuff that you can access, and so that's where I do think it becomes really interesting. The other thing too is when you can start to connect those chains horizontally, you start to worry less, about the amount of load you can put on it, because you can now, in theory, have 4 or 5 base chains that are interoperating, and it feels just like one ecosystem, right? Like you shouldn't have to worry. It's like you don't worry about the amount of servers when you're playing a game. You're not, maybe a little bit because of ping, so maybe not fully true. You're not obsessing over like, am I on the, what servers am I on and so forth. So yeah, this is where I hope we go, but this is why it's all time frames. I think where people talk past each other on Twitter is the experience sucks right now. Like it does. It's not great. Having to bridge, dude, just like it's a terrible user journey. And I think it's fair criticism. We're just playing a different game. I think we're playing a game where we see mass adoption in 3 or 4 years. Not building something that works for what is existing today. And it's not about what's right or wrong. It is 2 different styles. In fact, I love Solana because I think Solana hedges, the fact that like they already have an existing ecosystem that users can have this seamless experience. We're trying to build something that's going to support like 1000x and doesn't exist today. And we're years away from 1000x kind of thing. You're both the ability to support it and that level of adoption, but you're getting to see what a monolithic network can do for you as well.
One thing I wanted to touch on before we wind down here is sort of the open source aspect. So one of the things that sort of differentiates our media collective and also this podcast is that it's completely zero rights reserved. That's where the name ZEROPOD comes from. It's CC0. People can use our content any way that they like. They can share it across. It's basically the content equivalent of open source. And I believe really, really strongly in the benefits of open source. I think that it's interesting that OP is completely open source, like you said. MIT license, and so anyone can really just take it and work with it. What do you think it says? What do you think the success of the superchain says about the viability of open source as a business model?
It's a good question. I think, listen, if you're going to have open source like this, it really puts, pressure on yourself to say, how do I, above and beyond, create a really unique value prop and what I offer? And I think that pressure is good. I think open source nature is in the spirit of the space and the spirit of collaboration. It's really core to Optimism's DNA and culture from an open source front. And so where we think our superpower and what we're creating is unique is the governance model that's going to, oversee and govern this entire ecosystem and all these OP stack chains. And so, yeah, OP stack chain is the engine, but like where the value is, not to be like cheesy, is the heart of it, which is governance. And so if you create value and say like, you want to be in this framework, this governance framework is really great. These are all these people that contribute in all these different ways. This is how things get passed. This is how people build together. This is how you do it at scale. There's value in joining that, despite the fact you can just go do Blast, a la Blast.
I was just going to mention Blast because it's kind of interesting that Blast did that, right? Like, and even though Blast didn't, join the law of chains and they went their own way with it, I feel like it's still like a credit back to the OP stack that they decided to use the stack anyway. So it's kind of like even when you lose, you win in a way.
Yes, the stack is great. Like, and honestly, kudos to anybody that's building it. And if you look at L2B, most of those chains are all OP stack chains in some way or another, right? So yeah, I think that's the way to think about it. And it's create a value beyond just the actual underlying software itself.
Amazing. So we've talked a lot about your notable achievements over the past year at Optimism. I'd love to hear sort of the forward-looking thoughts from you about what you're most excited about working on over the next coming year. And I know a year is a long time in crypto, so if it's better to say 6 months,
we're getting dialed in. When November 20th, we release the 2025 intents to the community. So we will have.
Okay, give us some alpha. Give us some alpha. What are we going to see?
Yeah, it's a good question. One, I think making sure these chains get launched and are successful and helping support that. So you've got Sony, you've got Kraken, you've got Uni, World just, going to mainnet, all these different things, right? So like want to see great things for them and some of the other chains that are coming online as well. Want to get the chains interoperating so you can start to see what that looks like, have some wallets support that interop, and really start to show the user, hey, we're not years away. It's like, it's coming. I think that will be a big one. Driving, I would love to see, we have this dashboard called OP Biz Health, which is a public dashboard anyone can look at. And I would love to see us continue to move the overall market share of Superchain L2 transactions to 65-70%. It's about 45% today. That metric just to me is like proves more of you are getting adoption around a shared standard, right? If you see 75% of L2 transactions in a Superchain, just join up. You can launch it immediately. 10 RAS providers that support OP Stack, nothing stopping you. Get up and running. Join in, get to a stage one chain day one because we have personal default proofs, and get cooking. So that's what next year is. That's like a lot of work cut out for us to do, but we got to build on a lot of the momentum that was created this year.
I love it. Yeah, and I think that's important. You got to, if you see that 75% number, you're making the pie bigger, not just like splitting the pie up smaller.
Totally.
Right?
That's right.
Amazing.
We will.
I love it. Well, I appreciate your time, Ryan. It's been awesome to chat with you. Could probably chat with you all night, but I know you've got a hard stop, and so do I. Yeah, for sure. Well, hopefully we'll see you at one of the conferences on the circuit, and we'll be able to meet in person. But
I love that. I'm looking forward to it, Tody. I appreciate you, man.
Yeah, I appreciate you too, and we'll see you on the Superchain. All right,
take care, buddy.
Cheers.